What is the difference between privacy, security, and anonymity, as we have discussed all of them on this channel? Well, today we want to talk just a little bit about what that is and how Linux can help you with whichever one of those your biggest goal happens to be. Welcome back to Switch to Linux, where we teach you about switching to Linux, why you might want to do so, and how to take back more control over your life, over your computers, just things in general. And we had an excellent comment the other day where somebody asked, what is the difference between the privacy, security, and anonymity? And he says, you should maybe talk about this a little bit more on the channel at some point in time. I thought that was an excellent point. So let's go ahead and address these concerns. Of course, if you like this type of content, you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so now. And we're going to go ahead and dive onto this more philosophical discussion. And I'm just going to bring up just kind of the three big things that we can talk about in the light of these as we discuss privacy, security, and anonymity. So first we have to start with some basic definitions. First and foremost, let's talk security. Security itself, as a raw definition, is going to mean that your system is free of general compromise. Security on a website means that you're going in and you're entering data on some website about yourself. The basic thing you do is make sure there's an SSL. If there's not an SSL certificate, you don't get that padlock at the top of your web browser. Any data you're entering is freely passed in plain text over the internet. Anybody, anywhere in the connection can snoop on that traffic and see what it happens to be. Also, of course, security relates to, can people get in and listen in on your device? Can a person install malware and scrape information off of your device? All of this is information relating to security. How is your system maintaining itself away from possible compromise, actual compromise? Security itself is really that thing where we do need to push some updates because hackers are always finding ways in the back doors, and then the programmers of the software are figuring out how to close those doors as quickly as we can possibly find them. That ultimately we will have good systems which are secure, meaning there is nobody in there getting in when they shouldn't be getting in. That is security. Now, privacy is a little bit different, although it carries with it some things. Of course, the element of privacy we like to talk about here is how much data are you giving up to a company allegedly willingly? And I'm going to use the word allegedly because oftentimes we click accept terms or agree to the privacy statements because we need to get into the app, we need to finish the application, we need to do whatever. You're going out to the bank and they're like, do you agree to our terms? And they hand you a stack that looks like the latest omnibus bill. And just like the omnibus bill, we got to pass it to find out what's in there because we don't got 8 hours to sit there and read 500 pages of a privacy statement. Okay. I understand many people do that. And that's okay. You just need to understand that you are potentially risking things. That's why you at least peruse through there. You have a look at the headings. You see, do things look generally normal? I have read enough privacy statements top to bottom to know what is your basic standard legal requirement and what is in there that's a little crazy and wonky. So I know what types of things I'm looking for when we're talking about some system like that. And so with this, privacy, it relates to data being collected, but it's not an intrusion that was not intended in the software. So a privacy issue would be you're using your Windows computer and Microsoft is perpetually collecting data, including your file names. There was one video I kind of wanted to do, but I wasn't sure how I could do it with the censorousness nature of things. But it was an article that Brian Lunduke talked about recently where a certain documents platform was directly censoring files because they were inconvenient to a certain narrative. Interesting. Well, you've agreed to the privacy statement. It wasn't that Google got in there and saw what was going on. It's that they were kind of there looking and you had given them authorization to peruse the contents of your documents. That in and of itself is privacy. It more relates to, this is my system. These are the things that I have allowed X, Y, or Z company to do based on some actual reading their privacy statements, or at least ticking a box that says we have read their privacy documents. Now, the last one of these is anonymity. Anonymity itself basically means that you're blending into the crowd. You are merging in, and this is really, if you want to have the best way of protecting your data in this modern world, it's creating the gray noise. We talked about Mozilla has a new ad company, which I think is horrible, but one of the things they're doing in there is they are actually introducing gray matter into their analytics in order to prevent people from being able to figuring out who individual users are. That in itself is a good step. And if more advertisers or advertiser analytics companies did such things, we probably wouldn't have the privacy nightmares that America has right now, because America is like the land of the wild, wild west where it comes to this kind of stuff. So anonymity is the ability to blend into the background and not be seen by the nature by which you look like everybody else in the network. This is primarily the technology of anti-fingerprinting that you see Firefox doing, and I'm not sure if Chrome-based browsers do it or not, but the anti-fingerprinting, effectively what they're trying to do is they're trying to make everybody look the same. So that is your basic definitions. And how do we manage these different things? So I'm going to bring up 3 different projects up here, and we've talked about these all in the past, but I do want to mention these in and of themselves. The first one we will look at is the Tor project itself. And so the Tor project itself is the creation of Tor. Now, Tor itself is excellent for anonymity. That is ultimately what is there for. What the Tor project seeks to do is to connect everybody through. There is a lot of security and there is a lot of privacy, given that you do not log in. Remember, once you have logged in, you have immediately given up both anonymity and privacy. So the idea of using Tor or a Tor-based system is that you are not using any login on that network that is also used not on that network. So if you do want a Facebook account through the Tor network, you can only use that account through the Tor network. The very second you use it one time not on the Tor network, they immediately know you are the person who did everything with that account in the past. And so what the Tor project seeks to do is primarily focusing on anonymity by making 3 different connections. You have an entry node, you have an intermediary node, and then you have an exit node, and they're all 3 in different jurisdictions. So the ability to compromise the data would require the bad actor happens to have access to both the entry node and the exit node, and can make predictions about the amount of data going back and forth because of the packets. But because these are all in completely different jurisdictions, and the fact that Tor rotates these nodes on a regular intervals, makes it almost impossible for them to do that. And they actively remove nodes that they know are connected to, big state actors and things like that. So Tor itself is not perfect, but one of the better ways you can browse the internet anonymously. What they effectively try to do is, through various settings, they try and make everybody blend in with everybody else and make it look a little invisible. Now, an operating system like Tails, this actually takes the anonymity system of the Tor project and enhances it. Now, they've actually removed what Tails stands for. I think this might be part of a rebranding to, I don't know what their intention is here, but if you go look at Wikipedia and you see their old logo, they used to have this in their logo. Tails is an acronym. It means the Amnetic Incognito Live System. So amnetic in this case means it forgets. So I'm not sure why they dropped that from their logo, and I couldn't find a reference to it on the website. If it is still there, someone please let me know where that is. But they've dropped that from their website. I don't know why. But what Tails seeks to do is it produces a live system which is based on the Tor project, allowing you to get onto the internet anonymously, but then adds the privacy component that it does further things to make sure every person using Tails looks like every other person using Tails. And it does this by spoofing fingerprinting information. It spoofs your screen resolution. I guess it tries to spoof your screen resolutions. That's a little harder to do. But it makes sure that everybody looks very similar online. And that is really the what they're attempting to do. And they enhance the security a little bit by having a regular release cycle. But where they lack security is they have a 6-week release model. And they might be detecting bugs, but unless there's some serious critical thing, they're not going to send out an emergency patch upgrade. They have probably done it a couple times, but it's not common for them to do. So if there are security holes discovered, there could be a 6-week hole where a security hole is available, but it's generally considered safe because everybody looks like everybody else, and you'd have to do a very, very targeted attack in order to get in there and do something. But ultimately, they're best for privacy because the system, once you shut it down, that leaves absolutely no trace on the computer of what's going on. And remember, that privacy component requires them to know and collect and even store information on your computer. This is why you can't log into accounts if you want any form of privacy, because once, for example, you log into Facebook, or you log into Google, or you log into Microsoft, or you log into XYZ shopper's account, whatever else, once you have logged in, they now can use tracking cookies and track you across the internet, watching everything that you do on your system. And so you have given up all form of privacy once you have logged in. Therefore, even if you're not using Tails or you're not using Tor, you can actually get in here and you can enhance your privacy by regularly cleaning out cookies and not logging into any account unless you absolutely have to, and then actively log out of the account and clear cookies once you are done in that account, and then you can move on and do other things. This is where things like the web apps application that Linux Mint ships with, I think it was originally started with, I forget the name of the project. I think it actually started with Peppermint, where you can create containerized web apps. So effectively, you'd create a containerized web app based on either Firefox or Chromium or a number of other browsers. And then each one of those individual web apps operated as its own container. So you could log into there, use that application while simultaneously browsing the internet on your main Firefox, for example. And whatever was going on that logged in account can't see what's going on Firefox, and vice versa. And so this is a way that you can enhance your privacy by things like that. Those are the types of things that Tails tries to do. Of course, there's a LibreWolf browser attempts to do this. We have a new browser on the scene called the Malvad browser, which I should have pulled up the link for it. This is a conglomerate or a cooperation between the Tor project and the Malvad VPN company. They are seeking to produce a web browser that, through the ClearNet, makes everybody look exactly the same. And so with that respect, what we see is the ability to maintain that degree of anonymity on the internet through that browser, even though you're not necessarily on the Tor network, so the internet's going to be a little bit faster. Of course, that browser is kind of designed to use with a VPN, so of course you can blend in a little bit more. Now, once again, though, even if you're on the VPN, no matter what you're doing, once you log into an account, you might still be anonymous to the regular general website, but you are not anonymous nor private to any account you are logging into. Now, this brings us to security. And Qubes, I think, is the best at security. Although it is not the operating system of choice for everybody, it is a little bit more complicated to use. And we do have a whole playlist on Qubes, and it is definitely a system to keep around. I don't use it on a regular basis, but I do have one floating around for if I get suspicious emails or I want to do some extra research or things like that. These are the types of things that I might want to use something like Qubes for. Qubes itself carries with it some of the anonymity in that it can use both the Tor project and the ClearNet, and you can choose which one of those you want each individual workflow to move through. It carries with it a little bit of privacy in that you can have a container open which is not logged into anything, and it can have a container open that is logged into things. So just like using the web apps, you can have different containers that can't see each other, and so they can't track each other across the internet. But what Qubes does the best is security. Now, again, it's not perfect. As their tagline says, a reasonably secure operating system. I would still say this is one of the most secure operating systems that one can put on the internet. And the reason is it uses a series of virtual machines to containerize and isolate everything. So supposing that your main station that you're working through gets some form of compromise, it can't back its way out and see anything else in the system. It gets stuck inside that VM and there's no way for it to jump out. It just gets in there. It's like, I've infected this. Where the hell am I? You know, it's like, it just doesn't know what to do because every single component is isolated from each other. And this produces some complications with it, which is where some people will struggle because there is a specific VM which handles all of your USB drives. And then you have to grant permission when you plug in a USB drive. You have to root permission for one particular port to access one particular VM. And you oftentimes have to do that every time you plug a new device in. So using a web camera can be a little bit more complicated. Using a microphone like this one here can be a little bit more complicated. But for the person that's used to using Qubes, it's not actually all that complicated. But the security model allows it. It's kind of like what they tried to do with the Titanic. And remember, it sank, so Qubes can sink as well. What they tried to do with the Titanic is containerize out the ship. So if a hole got in one breach, it would isolate the leak to the other ones. The problem with the Titanic, of course, is 4 of them breached or something like that, 3 or 4, a number of them breached, and that caused it to go down. Well, Qubes has a similar containerization model, whereas if one system gets breached, it can't make it into the other. We have one main controller with really good controls over what gets in and out of it. That one controller allows you to route different things. You can say, this is this internet line, this is this internet line. I even created a third one for running VPNs on mine, so I can connect to a VPN route. I can tell the VPN route, use either the Tor project or use the regular internet before you connect to your VPN. There's so many things you can do with Qubes, but everything is all containerized, meaning it has the better of securities. So there is your basic information regarding your privacy, security, and anonymity. Now, how does this relate to using something like Windows or Mac or Linux? Ultimately, Windows itself is probably the least of the private and anonymous type systems, and it has a reasonably good security model. So it is closed sourced, so it is harder for people to find the bugs, but it's also harder for people to even suppose there could be bugs in the code. But remember, the open source software is how the XZ bug, which almost made its way into Linux, didn't actually make it into Linux because it was all open source and somebody noted something interesting in there. So in and of itself, Windows has a decent security model, very poor on anonymity and very poor on privacy, as it perpetually tries to get you logging into your Microsoft account and then forcing you to use that Microsoft account, which means they can have a direct tie-in not only to your IP address, but to an individual user at that IP address based on how the system is set up. So Windows is the least private and the least anonymous system while being very reasonably secure. Apple itself, like Windows, very reasonably secure. Probably a little bit more so as it's based on Unix and has a security model which is closer aligned to the Linux security model, in which different administrators and users, and of course Apple's added a lot of their own special touches. It is fairly hard to compromise an Apple system for the similar reasons it is a Microsoft system. However, the Apple system does have a few extra safeguards, making it a little bit more secure, although probably not significantly more. As far as privacy and anonymity, it can have a little bit of this. You can use an Apple computer without them perpetually trying to get you to log into an Apple ID account, although they do try and force you into that. If you are using your Apple with an Apple ID account, It has some similar issues as Windows. It is not private. It is not anonymous. But they do make it easier to use their system without it, meaning it's a little bit more private, a little bit more anonymous. So again, these are all on a spectrum, however. Linux is the better one as far as privacy and anonymity, as very few systems would have any form of accounts at all. I mean, Ubuntu has, if you want their extended security stuff. A few other ones might have some accounts floating in here and there, but for the most part, the Linux operating system doesn't really care who you are, so it's a lot better on privacy and on your anonymity, as the systems generally don't collect a lot of information about their users. The security model, I don't know. Different people have different opinions. You'll have to research that for yourself. I think the security model is better because the open source nature of Linux means more people are watching the system and making sure nothing wonky goes on. That being said, some people say it's open, so big state actors particularly could look at obscure pieces of the code, find vulnerabilities, and exploit them without alerting the rest of the community. And so it carries with it a double-edged sword. It is very good in some respects, and it carries with it a little bit of holes in other respects. It does have a much better model as far as security for the users, however, in which case your root users need to be authenticated differently than your basic main users, and most Linux distributions make sure that your regular user of your account is not an administrative user by default, and many modern Linux distributions disable the root user altogether, taking advantage of the sudo ability, giving your basic user the ability to do things as root, but it's very specific when that happens. So ultimately, I think Linux is the overall best in that respect, but there are certainly some questions about that. Hopefully this has been a very useful video, and I will leave you with the introduction to Qubes as we close this out. So have a look at that, because it is a fascinating operating system, even if you're choosing not to use it. And warning, if you are new to Linux, Qubes is probably not where you want to start with. Start with learning something else a little bit better. But with that, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a comment and a like down below. And have a look at the Qubes video, which I will link here on the end. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.